parish. You never said, I'm from Williamsburg. You said, I'm from Our Lady of Mount Carmel, Williamsburg. And that's how we kind of always identified ourselves. And I wish we can go back to those days. It was really just fun times. And I grew up in a household of my mom, Margaret, and my father, John. And I have a younger brother whose name is Vinny. He's actually a Catholic priest. You had him on your show a couple of weeks ago. Father Vincent Chiricella. He's the pastor of Our Lady of Grace Church in Gravesend, Brooklyn. We want to give a shout out to him, of course. I grew up in a family. We grew up in a small apartment in Brooklyn, and my mom and dad were religious. My mom was religious, and she had a dedication to Saint Cono, who was the patron saint of her town in Tiggiano, Italy. And as little children, we came to Christ always through Saint Cono. My mother would tell stories of how Saint Cono saved her town in Italy, in Tiggiano.
Was he an early martyr?
He was an early martyr, yeah. He died at 18 years old. Very young. He was a monk, and it was just a fantastic way for an introduction for us. And Mom would dress us up, Father Vincent and I, as Saint Cono on his feast day, which is June 2nd. And that happens to be the day that my brother was ordained to the priesthood, was June 2nd. So Saint Cono has been in our life. So we went to Mass every Sunday, and Dad would take us to Mass in his car and drive us to church. And Mass was always a fun time for us, because after Mass we would go to a pastry shop called DeLuca's Pastry Shop, which was a block away.
For the donuts.
For the pastries, they had the best cream puffs in the world, Father. The best cream puffs in the world. And we would buy cream puffs and bring them to my dad's mom's house, Conjeta, who lived on Bayard Street in Williamsburg. And our Sunday was structured that way. And then after we visit Grandma, we would go home, and Mom would prepare a beautiful Italian meal for us, and the family would come together in community and really just spend a beautiful day with each other. As I got a little older, I became an altar boy at the Lady of Mount Carmel, and there was a priest in our lives at Mount Carmel. Father Pecchio was the pastor at that time, and we had Father Vivona, was a very influential priest early on in my life. And priests to me as a young fellow were rock stars. I looked up to the priest. I wanted to be a priest as a young child growing up. And they actually came, and when I was in 8th grade, Father Vivona and Father Alfonso Sanelli came to my mom's house and requested for my mom and dad if I would go into Cathedral High School, which was a formation high school at that time, the prep seminary.
Washington and Atlantic.
Yes.
We know it well, yeah.
And I wasn't ready to go at that time. But I always tell people the story. Father Vincent at that time, Vinny, who's 3 years younger than me, was listening in his room, and I'm sure that he was always attentive to that too. But my brother and I would, we grew up regular boys, getting into a lot of trouble and having fun. But we would actually play Mass in the house. We would set up in the kitchen, and we would have, we would make one of Mom's large cups like the chalice, and a piece of bread. We would play Mass, which was along with a lot of other things we did at that time growing up.
It's not unusual, but it's entertaining to hear about it. It's delightful to hear about it.
Yes.
So you stepped away from Cathedral at that point, but your brother stepped in 3 years later.
My brother's journey to the priesthood was he didn't enter the seminary until he was in his late 20s.
Oh.
Yeah, Vincent went into the seminary when he was 29 years old. He was a radiologist before. He worked actually for the VA hospital as a radiologist. So his journey was a journey to his vocation, his formation in the priesthood was a journey that we both took. So like I said, we were rambunctious. We got into our fair share of trouble, but we were good boys. We were good boys. We were brought up in a house with a mom and dad that was faith was the center of our lives, and it was important to us. It was important that that we went to church. It was important to mom and dad. And I think what's going on today is the mom and dads are not going to church like they used to, and the children are not seeing that. So, who do they have to emulate then? It's just that sad. It really is. So I hope we can get back to that. Back to that. But that's how we grew up in Brooklyn.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, no, that was a great thing that you mentioned, because Our Lady is, when we went to Medjugorje, that's what she always comes and is the message that she's repeating to us, to pray for families, pray for holiness and peace and love within the family, because it starts there. Like you said, the children receive the love from the parents, and the parents, it's really important to be rooted in faith from a young age. It carries on through your whole life, through the generations. So yeah, we gotta pray for that.
Yeah, it was just my father was a TV repairman. He worked for RCA. That's when people used to fix TVs, Father.
I was
Catherine,
thinking, now you just put them on the curbside.
Now you just put it on the curbside, but my father would fix TVs. That's what he would do. And I always tell people that the dad, he showed us how to go visit.
He had the tubes.
He had the little tubes. He had a toolbox, and it was Father Vinny and I used to carry his toolbox when we were kids, and he would go on jobs, and go fix people's TVs. But I always tell people that's how Father Vincent and I got into ministering to people, I guess, and being very comfortable in visiting people, going to their homes. My father not only came to fix your TV, my father, John, not only came to fix your TV, he visited with you. And he was a big man like myself. So somebody would ask him, John, would you like a piece of cake or a cup of coffee? He said, sure. So his fixing the TV turned into a visit,
Right, yeah.
And it showed us, again, how to emulate somebody, how to interact with people, and how to visit with people. And Mom would cook for everybody, and everybody would come over, and she showed us how to interact with people. We've had so many different people over my mom's house through the years, so it was just
So
so
you
part of
really
your
had the
childhood.
faith really grew naturally in a warm, positive environment of a Catholic family. See, so you really had a head start on your own personal journey of faith. Of course, the whole thing of everybody emphasizes, well, young people have to make up their own minds, but they need help. They need help, and when they don't have it, they often wander around for a long time without any convictions about too much. So it's good to hear that that family was really an influence in your own case.
Yeah, kids need guidance, Father. The children need guidance today, and they need role models. They need role models to look up to. And if Mom and Dad are working around the clock and they're both at jobs and they don't have time for their children, my father made time. My father was going on jobs. He said, "Come with me. Come with me. I'm going to do this job. I'm going to fix the TV." And he would tell my mom, "I'm taking Michael and Vincent with me." And him go and fix those TVs at those people's houses was time for us to spend with our dad.
That's right.
So that's you are who you grow up around, and who your family are. Your role models are the people in your life, and if your mom and dad are not involved in your life, it's hard for you to look for mentors of people that you can look up to. So.
Yeah. So tell us how becoming a deacon came about. Was it like, did you hear God's voice, and then tell us how did that inspiration come about? Tell us a little bit about.
Well, people always are curious. I mean, I was curious when my brother was in the seminary, And I was telling Katrina and Father earlier, when we were talking before we went on the air, that we have 4 priests in the family. We have Father Jerry Despino, who's in Rockville Center. We have Father Francis Despino, who's at his Father Jerry's brother at St. Bonaventure. My brother, Father Vincent. And we have Father Andrew Larigina, who's a priest for Caritas. He works for the Vatican in Rome. And we just had a young man, Joseph Sayano, who's our cousin, just entered the seminary. So please pray for him. It's his first year in seminary.
Where is
He's
he
at
studying?
Immaculate Conception in Douglaston, Queens.
Oh, okay.
So
He's
he's-
on the college level.
He's on the college level. He just started his journey. Like I said, as a young man, I wanted to be a priest because I said priests were rock stars for me. For me, I was around them. They were always around us and friendly to us, and so many positive priests in our life. And I wanted to be one, but I was frightened always to, I don't know, for the whole process. So as life went on, I let that go, and I became married. I married my wife Judy. We're married for 29 years. We have 2 children, Jennifer and Michael, and we have a beautiful granddaughter, Andrea. And
Are you
but-
presently living in Bayville?
I'm presently living in Bayville, where Father Peter was the pastor at St. Gertrude's Parish
What a wonderful little spot.
for
there.
17 years. And I've been going to Bayville since I'm 5 years old. And it's the first time I met Father Peter, and the first thing he said is, "Where do you live?" He says, "Bayville." He says, "Well, I was the pastor there for 17 years at St. Gertrude." And I says, "God's providence is always here, and Our Lady is always working, always." But people always ask me, like Katrina asked me, I was always curious about how somebody had their vocation. So Father Vincent would bring over a gentleman that he was in the seminary with, and he would tell my mom, "I'm coming over with two or three guys from the seminary, Ma, for dinner." And he would walk through the door with 10 or 12, like half of his class, and Mom would have enough food for everybody.
Bring in 3 or 4, you brought 10.
Right, he would bring 10, and I would ask them, like Katrina asked me, what was your calling? Like, what made you going to the priesthood? And they all had different stories. It's not like a bolt of lightning hits you one day and you say, "This is it. Here I go." It was a gradual process for me. I've always been interested, and always as a child, loved helping people and being around people. And
But now presently you're involved in youth ministry in Brooklyn?
Yes.
Is that your full-time job, or is it, tell
Oh.
us about all that?
well, I'm a youth minister at Our Lady of Mount Carmel Parish in Williamsburg. I run I oversee all the youth programs there, and I'm doing that on a part-time basis right now. I would love to do more full-time, but I'm there 2 or 3 days a week, and I started that program about 10 years ago with the pastor, Father Fonte at that time, and then Monsignor Calise, really, him and I really grew the program, and it went from my idea for the program was to have the children evangelize and go out and minister to people, go to nursing homes, pray the rosary on Bedford Avenue. Williamsburg has become this very progressive, hipster neighborhood in Brooklyn. And we started that from a small program, and we built it into a nice program now. My current pastor is Monsignor Jamie Gignatello, who's also the vicar for the Diocese of Brooklyn, Queens, for the Generations of Faith and the Sal's Media. So the program is good. We meet 3 or 4 times a month. The children, we meet on Friday nights and one Sunday a month. And my youth ministry, it consists of prayer, talk, and interaction with the children. And then we do some ministry work. I'm not just throwing basketballs out on the gym floor. And after a couple hours, we do Bible studies with the children. So we're really trying to get them to where they have to go. And I got that from my father, who was always around us when we were younger and would take me or my friends or Father Vinny's friends wherever he was going. If there was room in my dad's car, he was taking my girl cousins that their fathers had no cars. If there was room in his car, he was taking them with him, and we were having a good time for a few hours. So that's where I got my calling for youth ministry, to work with the youth.
You have another part-time job on top of that also?
Plus, yes, I
You
work. I
gotta
work.
juggle that.
I work in Manhattan. Yeah, I do security in Manhattan in a building, and I'm studying to become a deacon, and I'm also a catechist. So I got a lot of stuff going
A
on.
lot of-
Yeah,
lot of-
wow.
lot of
So I worked at
juggling a lot.
UPS for 30 years,
Oh, I see.
and I retired from UPS. So Katrina asked me about my diaconate journey, and
So you have a pension also? from
I have a pension from UPS. Yeah, I was a UPS driver, but I was also a shop steward. Like I said, I always wanted to help people.
Right, right, right.
So,
So I'm sorry to have to ask you things that seem to connect to money, but after all, any time when you're thinking about church work,
Yeah.
people wonder, how can I survive myself? So here's your journey. Now, when you got your pension, you were free a little bit to engage in a couple of other things.
I was definitely
Beautiful,
free.
Beautiful, beautiful.
I was definitely free to engage into really going after my diaconate, which I was really putting on the back burner for years because I just had no time with UPS. UPS is a job where you get home 8:30, 9 o'clock at night. I was doing union work, and it's funny. I ran for a position in my union as a recording secretary about 7 years ago, and the gentleman that was running for the presidency said to me, "Michael, you talk more about God in the church and becoming a deacon than you do about becoming a recording secretary, which is a big position in the how the union is structured, how a union is structured." And I says to him, "Bill, you know what?" He actually told me at one point, "Michael, why don't you just go right into this deacon thing and forget about all this union stuff?" And I says, "Bill, you know what? I wish I could right now." So it was always. It was always gnawing at me, always like a light. I always explain to people it's like a lighthouse on the ocean that's flickering. And I just had to answer that call. I just really had to answer it. And people seem to think because my brother's a priest and we have so much clergy in our family that, it's automatic for you to become a deacon. I want to tell you the process is the church makes the process difficult. And we had when I applied for the diaconate, there was over 80 people, I believe, 80 men that applied for it, and they only accepted 13 men.
Okay.
And the first person they interview is your wife.
Yes.
Tell us about that. Why?
Oh, because my wife's Judy, who I love deeply. We've been together since we're 16 years old.
Did you guys meet in Brooklyn?
We met in Brooklyn. Yes, we met at my uncle's pizzeria. My uncle owned a pizzeria called Driggs Avenue Pizzeria, and she used to come in and come into my uncle's store, and I just fell in love with her from the first moment I saw her. She was so beautiful, and so she was so quiet, and I talk a lot, so we got along. She's still quiet, and I still do most of the talking. But the first person they interview is Deacon Jorge Gonzalez came down to Our Lady Mount Carmel, rector. We had a meeting there, and I thought I was just going to meet with him. He says, "No, I want you and your wife to come," and he says, "Michael, how are you?" I says, "How are you, Deacon?" And he said, "I'd like to speak to Judy." And him and Judy had a conversation for about 15, 20 minutes, and then the interview kept on going from there on. But the wives have to be involved because the life of a deacon is a little different from the priest, because a deacon's in the secular world. So your wife has to be on board 100% because a lot of times you're out and you're sacrificing yourself for the
In the
church.
Brooklyn program, do they stress that family comes first and then the diaconate? How do they deal with the priority there?
Right, family always comes first.
Yeah.
Family always comes first, and then the diaconate. So they've been so great with any kind of family issue you have. like I said, Deacon Jorge, that runs the program, Deacon Jorge Gonzalez, and Father Thomas Chabino, they've been so great with so far as family always coming first.
That's good.
Yes.
So basically, they want to just make sure that the wife is on board 100%, so that you guys both could work together towards, this vocation that the husband is undertaking, right? Would you say that?
Yeah, the wife has to be aboard 100%, and she has to be aboard all the way through the process.
Mm-hmm.
All the way through the process, we have to meet periodically with the board, which consists of, lay people, deacons and their wives, and the priests. And she has to keep on getting interviewed. The husband and wife have to keep on getting interviewed, and she has to be on board all the way till the end. And at the end of the process, which I told you earlier in the show is 5 years, she writes a letter to the bishop, granting her permission again. So in the beginning of the process, she has to write a letter to the bishop, granting her permission for her husband to be into this program. And at the end of the process, she has to again write that letter to the bishop.
Wow,
So
that's
without
interesting.
yeah,
Without
She-
both,
she-
it
And she's
can't.
approving of it, that she wants this.
yes,
She
she
wants-
and she has to, they have to be on board. And when you become a deacon, if your wife does pass away, you cannot marry again. Yeah, you cannot marry again. So.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And tell us, what is the 5-year preparation like? I know you mentioned to me earlier that you take classes, and so
Right.
tell me a little bit about that.
Well, the preparation is the first year of is a year of discernment. So you go to classes twice a week, but those classes really consisted of a pastoral ministry class, which would be, on a Wednesday night, and on Monday night you would have a class with the brother deacon and his wife, and you would go through different scenarios. So the first year is really discernment.
Is it up at Hunt?
It's in Immaculate Conception Seminary in Douglaston,
In Douglaston.
Queens.
So Brooklyn runs its own program. That's not
Yes.
not blended into Rockville Center.
No, it is blended into Rockville Center.
Okay.
We actually had a professor last year, Father William Cleary, that taught us Old Testament, and he would, while he was teaching the Old Testament class, he would have it on Skype
Okay.
with the other diacon classes in Rockville Center, or even in Dunwoody in Yonkers.
Okay, so
They would do it
one
at two
teacher,
sites.
One teacher, 3 locations.
Yeah, which was really a challenge last year. But there's only so many priests that teach the Old Testament, Father. And this priest was really on the money. So then after the first year, Katrina, then we go into classes Monday and Wednesday night from 7 to 9:30 p.m. And then we meet maybe 1 or 2 Saturdays a month, and then we go on retreats. But the classes are really challenging, Father. They really are. It's just
Do you guys have to get a master's degree, or do they are these non-academic courses, or how does that
well,
work?
because I didn't graduate college, so I'm auditing the classes.
Oh, okay.
But the gentlemen that have college degrees have to get a master's degree.
Okay.
So they're writing, we have to take midterms, we have to take,
So you have to do everything, but you're on an audit basis rather than a credential basis.
right, so I have to take midterms, I have to take finals, and sometimes we have to write a small paper, but the gentlemen that are doing the masters have to write 10, 15, 20-page papers,
Right.
and,
You guys
finals
write-
and the midterms.
You guys write a little shorter than that.
We write a little shorter, sometimes we don't have to do a paper, but we have to take the midterm and the finals, and it's challenging, because most of us are working. Like I said, I retired, but I went back to doing all these jobs monetarily. You still have to take care of your family.
Right, absolutely.
And I told them early on. I says, this is really a challenge, but you know what? If it's God's providence, I'm enjoying the classes. So last year we had Old Testament. We had Trinity, which was really a challenge to me. And this semester, we have Christology, and we have ecclesiology. So those are really challenges. But you know what? I'm learning stuff that I'm really interested in. So it's an intense process. Everybody's assigned a mentor. So my mentor is Deacon Phil Franco, who is actually the deacon of my parish. He's also a PhD, Dr. Philip Franco, and he's an adjunct professor at St. John's University, and he's a teacher at the Cathedral High School.
Okay.
So that's my mentor. So that's a good mentor to have, and I have so many. My brother's a good mentor, and my spiritual director is Monsignor Caserta, who is fantastic. So I have all these positive priests and deacons and good friends in my family in my life to get me through this to my formation process for the diaconate.
Well, thank you so much. You're on
Very good,
fire
thank you.
for this. Yeah, we're actually going to play a middle song right now, All for Jesus. You know, everything that we do is all for Jesus. And I just encourage you just to listen along, relax, and we'll come back in a second. Thank you.